give confirmation because I'm not able to hear some voice. Please.
No, no, sir, we cannot hear you.
Am I audible now?
Yes, we are audible.
Great.
Revan, you can start.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we are audible.
Great.
Revan, you can start.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we are audible.
Great.
Revan, you can start.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we
Ma'am,
are audible.
can we start?
Just 1 minute, exact at 10 o'clock, we'll be starting.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Sachin, sir.
Good morning.
Nice to see you after a long time.
Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?
All good, all good.
Yes.
Okay, Revan, sir, let's start.
Yes, ma'am. A very good morning to everyone present over here. On behalf of the IQAC Dr. D.Y. Patil College of Pharmacy, Akurdi, Pune, I, Dr. Revan Karodi, Associate Professor and the Head Department of Pharmacognosy, extend a warm welcome to one and all present over here for this national level webinar series. This webinar is being hosted and organized by Dr. D.Y. Patil College of Pharmacy in association with the APTI, that is Association of Pharmaceutical Teachers of India, as a part of national webinar series on regulatory affairs. Today, this is the second day, scheduled on 25 of this very good morning. And we are delighted to see the overwhelming response from, I think, many of you have 80 plus participants have joined this session. Before we proceed for this session, I just want to give a quick instructions. Like all we know that we are on Google Meet, so all are requested to kindly mute yourself, and participants are requested to rename themselves. And before going for this session, the important things are like this: the feedback link and the quiz is mandatory for receiving the certificates for the participants. Now, this program is being successfully coordinated under the aegis of the Dr. D.Y. Patil College of Pharmacy and IQAC. I welcome all these participants. I'm thankful to all the coordinators like Pallavi Gosai ma'am, Kiran Makhija ma'am, Kalyani Sande ma'am, our Vice Principal Shilpa Chaudhary ma'am, our Principal Dr. Neeraj Bevare sir. We sincerely thank them for this continuous support and guidance for providing this webinar series. Now, it is my privilege to introduce the today's distinguished speaker, Mr. Sachin Gundecha. I request the coordinating team to do the arrangement for the same. Mr. Gundecha is currently working as Assistant General Manager, Regulatory Affairs at Genova Biopharmaceuticals Limited, Pune, with over than 16 years of rich experience in pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical regulatory domain. He has extensive expertise in global regulatory submissions across the regions such as Asian, Africa, CIS, LATAM, GCC, and ROW markets. He has expertise in preparation and review of CTD, ACTD, and national dossiers, CNC documentation, regulatory strategy development, and compliance management. He has handled the submissions of ISO, DCGI, clinical trials, test licenses, and product approvals. Prior to Genova Pharmaceuticals, he has worked with the reputed organizations like Sava Medical Healthcare, Serum Institute of India, and MQ Biopharmaceuticals. He is a recipient of Exemplary Individual Contribution Award in association with the Economic Times, awarded Best Students of the Year during the academic career, active speaker, judge, and contributor in national and webinar and other conferences. And he has expertise in regulatory strategy, compliance, and global dossier submissions. Today's the session will be delivered by Gundecha sir is on the regulatory strategies for emerging markets and DMF versus ASMF versus CEP, that is global differences and strategies. I again request all the national webinar coordinators to do the all the arrangements for the same. And with this brief introduction, I welcome Gundecha sir, and I request Gundecha sir to kindly take over the session. Sir, this platform is yours. We are eager to learn from the valuable insight from you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Evan, Professor Evan. Thank you very much for this nice introduction, and thank you very much for providing me an opportunity to have a session with eminent personalities across the forum. My sincere thanks to Principal Dr. Shilpa Chaudhary, Vice Principal Dr. Shilpa Chaudhary, Ma'am, Principal Dr. Neeraj Vyavare, sir, and thank you very much for providing me an opportunity. I will start without wasting your time to the regulatory strategy for emerging market. If I'm allowed, I should I share the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I would request you, anyone, to confirm whether my screen is visible with the titles.
Yes, it's visible, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, answer, if I understand correctly, the recipient are postgraduate student, industry professional, and professors, right? Participants in the training.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks for the confirmation. Now, when we talk about regulatory affairs and regulatory strategy, the most prominent and important thing coming to the picture is about requirement of dossier. How do we strategize our filing? What are specific differences? I'm not talking about the similarity, but I'll focus on the differences of various market and their respective requirements. Why this is important? Because similarity is always discussed in terms of CTD, which is common technical document or common technical dossier, in which we have a defined set of information about Model 2, Model 3, Model 4, and Model 5. However, Model 1 changes from country to country. Again, CTD based on of country, they are also manipulating or changing the requirement in terms of Model 3 and in terms of Model 4 and 5. So, what the difference is, that is more prominent and more important than the similarity. That is the reason I'm focusing in that sense. So regulatory strategy for emerging market consists of, broadly, if we are speaking, it is consists of ROW, so rest of the world, apart from 3 ICH countries or regions, we would like to say EU region, US, and Japan. These, apart from these 3, all are coming under the semi-regulated or stringent regulatory authority. If you consider, then it includes Australia as well. It includes along with that other countries as well. So with that, we are moving ahead. What will be the overall agenda of the presentation? It will be like emerging market overview. Why we are choosing the emerging market? What are the regulatory challenges or hurdles? Then emerging market product development strategy and regional strategy with reference to Asian market, Africa, and BRICS. Now, when we talk about ASEAN, it's not Asian, it's ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nation. Then we talk about Africa. Africa is divided into 3 parts: like EAC, East African countries, then African countries, and South Africa. And when we talk about the BRICS, it is Brazil, India, China, South Africa. So when we are talking about the emerging market, the population which we are talking about, if you say APAC or Asia Pacific or ASEAN region, the population is approximately 4 billion. When we talk about Russia and CIS, Commonwealth Independent States, which is a Soviet Union previously, and now the Russia and other CIS states or countries, the population is approximately 292 million. Middle East, the population is approximately 1,247 million, and Latin America, the population is approximately 650 million. So cumulatively, more than 80% of the population is lying into the emerging market. That is the reason most of the countries are targeting emerging market along with lucrative market of US and Europe as well as Japan. Okay, now when we talk about the emerging market and pharma emerging market, which are the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 countries. So if we talk about the BRIC, so it is Brazil, Russia, India, China. Along with that, now Mexico has joined hands in the BRICS. Then Indonesia, South Korea, and Turkey. Then out of that, then emerging countries, if it's like China, Brazil, Russia. We also have other European countries which are considered as a top 3 tier countries like Poland, Argentina is there. Then we also have other countries from Southeast Asian nation like Vietnam, and coming under other countries like Thailand, Indonesia, based on their population and the requirement. Now, why we are choosing the emerging market? As we are focusing towards higher population, so every industry is market driven. So whatever the supply is, it is based on the market. So demand and supply. The first and foremost strategy when we are talking about the product and product portfolio profile, then that is the reason we choose the emerging market is first high growth potential of pharmaceutical demand, because there is a hell amount of the potential because of the high amount of the population which is available, the requirement which is there. Then it is a big market, ever expanding. It has generic as well as biosimilar market. Now here we need to understand what is the difference between generic and biosimilar. In pharmaceuticals, when you are talking about the innovator product and the next subsequent product, which is copy of the innovator product, is called as generic. However, in case of biological product, it is never a generic, because generic is an exact copy of say chemically synthesized product of the innovator. However, biosimilarity, it is even a second batch manufactured by innovator that becomes similar to the first batch, because getting out the requirement with reference to biologicals and copying the exact identical things is nearly impossible. So subsequent product after the innovator of same genetic sequence and same therapeutic dose, these are called as biosimilar, not as a generic. So that is the basic difference between generic and biosimilar. And the market is ever expanding. Then most of the regulatory system are evolving towards the ICH, International Council on Harmonization. Okay, now when we are talking about evolving towards ICH, and we talk about the CTD, right? So all these things and the CTD market, everything is revolving towards the ICH guideline, whether it could be a product development guideline or whether it could be related to method development guideline, product lifecycle management, or you can say about the multidisciplinary guideline, safety guideline, efficacy guideline, or quality guidelines. Then government has started increasing on this expenditure on the healthcare. Most of the countries now, they are adapting the insurance policies so that medicines will be affordable to the common people of the country. Take an example of Mauritius, which is a small country. However, the large market is covered up under the insurance. So government is the one who procures medicine which is required for the large population. Take a small country, another small country, which is Sri Lanka, where because of the small amount of the population, they're also covering maximum medicine under the national tender. Even take an example of our India, where the largest population of the world, we have started various schemes like Aadhaar card or national insurance policies have been there, and most of the people are adopting the insurance. Everything is because there is awareness, and people are more curious about the proper health. That is the reason normal life expectancy before 15 year in India it was close to 50 years. Now the normal life expectancy has gone up to 65 plus years, just because of the evolution and awareness about the healthcare, and government had started spending on awareness and healthcare and insurance schemes. Then take an example of high population, aging population, example China. Basically, India is considered as a young country. However, China is considered as an old age country because of their previously applied restrictions about one child policies. Nowadays, the average age of the people, those who are residing in China, is close to 44 or 45 years. However, average age of Indian population is around 32 or 33 years. So, as aging is there, then it leads with diseases and medicine requirement associated with age. Then we have a high rates of Western type disease like diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular, mental and health issues. Along with that, one major component is stress, and another major component is related to central nervous system, like stroke, brain-related disorders. Like with this, also there is increased awareness of available therapies through internet and social media. So for example, previously the countries where thrombolysis was not aware, thrombolysis is nothing but dissolving the clot inside the body just by injecting one of the well-known molecule known as connector place injection. So if there is a acute myocardial infarction and within 4.5 hours, golden hours of the onset of the symptoms for the heart attack or myocardial infarction, if you administer the tenecteplase, it dissolves all of the clots which are present in the body to the maximum extent, and thereby in the supply of blood is proper throughout the body, and that leads to normalization of ST segment elevation, and thereby chances of heart attack or curing of heart attack was there within 5 seconds of administration of the injection. Now think, within 5 seconds clots are, the blood flow is getting normal and ST segment elevation is become normal. This is how the awareness of various social medias and internet has created amongst other, and that is the reason in these countries medical tourism has also been increased, and thereby consumption of medicine, right medicine to the right people is also increased. Covering all this and more than 70% of the population throughout the world, emerging market is considered as a lucrative market. Further, if you talk about EU, there are 210 days of approval which is required, and for US, approximately 1 year of approval time is required. However, the demand of technical analysis or technical data is extensively high, for which it requires 2 to 3 additional years of investment in terms of money, as well as in terms of resources and in terms of data requirement, and then only you can seek the approval from US and Europe. However, considering the bridge analysis and bridge study, emerging market has integrated a product development and decision taken on early product development has impact of success in emerging market, and that is the reason product are getting at the faster rate in the emerging market as compared to the approval in US and Europe based on the data requirement of the system. Now, what are the regulatory challenges? We spoke about the similarities. I said about the similarities, but what is the difference that creates the challenges? As a complex environment, say for example, Russia, take an example where amaranth dye is banned. So you cannot use the product which is consisting of amaranth. So syrups or tablets where coloring agent like amaranth has been used, that are not authorized to register. Now take an example of India, gatifloxacin is banned in India. However, gatifloxacin is allowed to be sold in other market. Take an example of nimusulide. Nimusulide is banned in the western region. However, nimusulide can be prescribed here in India for the patient which are aging more than 12 years. Now, there are such differences of the requirement are there. This leads to the complexity in developing the product. Say, for example, product which I am going to develop for Russia. So I need to consider the color index, saturations, and use of the color. However, such is not the requirement in other country. Now, take an example of antibiotic gatifloxacin, which is banned in India. However, such is not the requirement for Sri Lanka or other countries. Vice versa, nimusulide, it is banned outside the world. It is still used in the certain emerging countries and in India as well. So requirement changes. Again, when you talk about the clinical trial or preclinical data, two root, two species data for the preclinical studies, and when you talk about the clinical trial data, global clinical studies or country-specific clinical studies, again the requirement getting differ. Say, for example, South Africa, they ask local city a breach by equivalent study of 20 population. I'm quoting an example. Say, for example, Russia, they're asking product which is first registered in Russia. Similarly, Australia, if you talk about the Australian therapeutic registered goods, ARTP, or in terms of TAG registered product, at that moment of time, they ask us to have the comparative analysis against the registered product. So these are complex challenges and complex environment which creating hurdle for uniform product development and product registration, ease of the product registration. Then you have diverse region with different regulatory authorities. Say, for example, India, you have CDSU. For Sri Lanka, you have NMRA. For Vietnam, you have DAV. For South Africa, you have SAPRA. For Colombia, you have NVIMA. For Brazil, you have ANVISA. For Mexico, you have COFEPRIS. Then for Tanzania, you have TFDA, or now it is known as TMDA. For Taiwan, you have Taiwan FDA. For Russia, you have Ministry of Health. For China, you have SFDA, China. Now, these different regulatory authority are distributed with a different region, and with the different region, information has been changed. Now, you understand, as there are diversified region and different regulatory authorities, then requirement is getting also differ from region to region and country to country. Again, now next is most important factor, looking at the current scenario, like cultural and political consideration for interaction with local authorities and key opinion leaders. So, for example, you are aware about the Gen Z revolution, which had happened in Nepal. So, but what had happened, like it creates a gap between the system, governmental system, procurement, and other things. So that create a challenge. Political instability doesn't allow you to get the product registered. People, those who are working overnightly, has been transferred. Similar type of activities has been done in neighboring countries as well. So you know what happened? This create a political challenge, even for the Peru or other countries. When there is a political drift or shift, at that moment of time, what happened? Like administrative or bureaucrats get changed. So those who are working with throughout the year while developing of the product or approving of the product, they might get changed, and it creates pose another challenge. Then non-harmonized CTD requirement except for GCC and ASEAN. Now, say for example, ASEAN you have a harmonized requirement, and GCC you have a harmonized requirement, but you feel that, but it's not a fact. Matter of fact is quite different. Even in the GCC, you require some countries as a NIS non-electronic EU CTD submission or electronic submissions, and in ASEAN region also there are certain countries which accept other CTD format as well. Like Thailand, they accept the EU CTD format. Singapore has their own requirement. Malaysia has their own requirement. You know, there are non-harmonized requirement of the CTD, and we have a different set of requirement. Like ACTD is different and EU CTD is different. ACTD has 4 parts, like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. However, other CTDs has model requirement as model 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and model 2 and model 3 combinedly represent the part 2. Model 4 is equal to part 3, and model 5 is equal to part 4. Then moving to the next, number of markets moving towards or recognizing the ICH. So most of the countries are trying to adapt the ICH. However, what has happened, if you adapt all the ICH requirement blindly, then there are high chances that medicine, affordable medicine, will not be available to the population where your per capita income is less. Wherever you go, healthcare system should be affordable to all of the people. Not only affordable, however, the innovative medicine should also be available. If most of the countries are accepting that they are going to recognize the ICH region only and ICH product only, then cost of development is also high, and then affordability also come into the picture. I'm not at all saying that the medicine quality has to be compromised. Okay, when we talk about the affordability, it is equivalency of the medicine, equivalency of the product in terms of therapeutic equivalence, in terms of pharmaceutical equivalence, or in terms of bioequivalence with reference product, and that has to be proven. Nowadays, agencies are coming up with newer guidelines where preclinical and clinical studies are starting waived off for generic product. However, bioequivalence studies are still applicable. Multimedia dissolution studies are applicable when you're talking about the pharmaceutical product. In terms of biopharmaceutical product, you have to perform either phase 3 clinical trial, or you have to perform the phase 1 PKPD study and phase 4 studies. Such requirements are coming up and popping up into the market. Now agencies are becoming more sophisticated, demanding more information. Say for example, I just mentioned that I'm following entire ICH. Zimbabwe is one of the country who is extensively following the ICH requirement and guideline. However, affordability is coming into the picture, and people are asking. Say for example, I would like to quote a general example, like they are asking a Mercedes car at the rate of Creta, or at the rate of Celery, or at the rate of Swift. So that affordability, sophistication, specification requirement are of Mercedes. So you cannot provide a, Maruti Suzuki car just like a Mercedes with all the level of comfort. It will serve your purpose, medicine that are of the same quality. However, they would have not generated extensively the data which is required as per. But comparative clinical studies in terms of bioequivalence could be there. Comparative analytical assessment will be there. Comparative multimedia dissolution studies has to be there. So these are the requirement, and with this requirement, as sophistication demands the more information. I also quoted example about local clinical trial requirement expectation in terms of with the Russia or CIS region, you have in South African region, you have in Australian region. So that is also another challenge. A variable timeline. I quote an example of EU where I talk about the 210 days. In US, since initial stages, I talk about the 1 year. However, emerging market has varying timeline, like 2 years to 3 years to get the product registered. One of the product which I have filed in emerging market, it took 10 years to get product registered. Can you imagine the long time of 10 years? Because regulatory authority that were not matured enough to understand the data, there were certain hiccups to understand the information. Then what had happened, there is a revolution, 5 years has happened, new inspector came. Now it again we have to teach the same. Now what had happened, like inspector which are more learned, they came into the picture. They may try to understand, okay, these are the biosimilar product, this is how the movement is, this is how we have talking about the safety measurement, PSUR, periodic safety update requirement. Then we are talking about the adverse event reporting, we are talking about the pharmacovigilance, and then thereby they are into the comfortable zone, and they allow us a product registration. These are the requirements, such as the basic steps when we talk about the challenges about variable timelines. Then companies need to have local presence in the country, either as an affiliate office or partner with distribution. Simply, when we talk about India, we are talking about made in India, make in India. Similarly, other countries are also promoting their facilities and their plants. So thereby they are asking that at least an Indian agent is required in India. So similarly, another agent or local distribution or local manufacturer is required when you are talking about registration of the product in their countries. When we talk about the emerging product development strategy, all this consideration comes into the picture. Like when we talk about the quality, supply chain, submission strategy, life cycle management, commercial consideration, and clinical requirement. why and how these differ. Say, for example, you have world is again divided into zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4 based on the temperature requirement or temperate zone requirement. Again, in that case, stability requirement getting varies for a product which are meant to be stored at room temperature for EU region or US region where average annual temperature less than 15 degrees Celsius. It doesn't matter when the same product is coming into the India and stored at room temperature. Currently, we are facing El Nino and our temperature in Pune, which was never ever touched to 41 degrees Celsius ever in the month of April. It has crossed 40. Now, say for example, product meant to be stored at room temperature, what will happen to the product which is stored at 40 degrees Celsius? Because all the study of room temperature has been done at 15 degrees Celsius or less than the average temperature of 15 degrees Celsius. Such challenges are coming into the picture. Okay. At the same time, we have a XIG or we have Siachen region in India, where as of now also currently temperature is at the sub-zero condition or 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. However, you take an example of Rajasthan, where currently the temperature is 35, 37 degrees Celsius lesser than the Pune. And you take an example of Mumbai, where the temperature is almost 40 degrees Celsius. However, the relative humidity is crossing to 70 degrees, 70%. I hope you understand the difference between humidity and relative humidity. So, percent of moisture which is available in the air is humidity, and relative percentage with reference to the saturated air is relative humidity. And with that relative humidity, temperature and storage condition becoming a challenge. So you have for countries, those who are falling into the zone 4, they are again into zone 4A and B, and their requirement is 30 degrees Celsius temperature normal at long-term storage and 75% average. However, other countries are falling like less 30 to 65 in zone 4A. And if you're talking about zone 3, they are talking about the less than 25 degrees Celsius, and zone 2, they are talking about the 15 to 25 degrees Celsius. So this is how the requirement of stability is there. Now, in that sense, supply chain, that becomes a very hectic case. How do you supply the product considering all these variables into the storage condition, right? Challenges, requirement, and environmental condition, shipping condition, that added into the product cost. If we are trying to supply via sea, then the humidity or moisture content that comes into the picture. When you are trying to supply via air, so cost of the shipment getting increased. Again, the supply chain is having a playing a major role into its submission strategies. Some of the strategies, some of the countries, they are working with the online platform. Some of the countries are asking about the CDs. Some of the countries are still asking about the paper submissions. So again, the strategies are getting varied, and life cycle maintenance where post approval changes are coming into the picture. Then you have certain variations or other online development which are ongoing, that comes into the picture. Then you have a commercial consideration. Say, for example, one of the product in high niche or high income country is required in terms of pre-filled syringe. However, one of the countries, those who doesn't require pre-filled syringe, they are supplying with a vial. I'll quote a simple example of Me12 Fort injection, which is multivitamin or B12 injection, methylcobalamin injection. Now it is supplied with in 30 rupees, where independent syringe or injection is given along with B12. One multivitamin which is given in the PFS. Now the costing of independent is 30 rupees, and when it is in terms of pre-filled syringe, MRP becomes 95 rupees, because ultimately at the end, patient is the one who bears the packaging cost as well. Now that commercial consideration comes into the picture. This is how various product development strategy has impact of each and every section, where how can we develop, how can we take the product up. That cases are been discussed and talked about while product is developing or while product is into the registration stage. Now we are talking about the ASEAN region, Association of Southeast Asian region. When we talk about the ACTD format adaptation, ACTD is nothing but Associated Southeast Asian Nation, ASEAN CTD, Common Technical Document, Part 4 wise submission. Then you have leverages of references approval. It focuses on the stability and quality information. Again, local partner is also required, and phased submission are also required in terms of Asian countries. Now, when you're filing or when you're doing the strategies filing in Asian region, you have to understand that it is falling under the condition of zone 4. So it's better be considering the humidity across the sea boundaries countries. You are talking about developing the product, the and stability should be 30 to 75, so that lastly most of the countries are getting covered. Once the product is stable at the extreme condition, product is automatically stable at the lower condition. So that developmental thing that you need to think when you are developing or doing the strategy for submission of the product. Say for example, another country is there where Muslim population is there. In that country's product which are from porcine origin are not going to be accepted. Now here we need to, while developing, the product should not have an animal component which is from porcine origin, because you need to give the declaration that none of the component which are used into the product manufacturing is from pork origin. Right? You're getting my point. So when we talk about such a requirement, sorry, uh, there is certain issue with the internet. So sorry for that. When we are talking about the such a requirement, we have to understand what are the local population, what is the quality information that requires. Some of the countries are asking about the halal certificate. So strategy, country of origin, everything we have to discuss and we have to work it out. So when we talk about the Asian map, apart from India, we are talking about, because India we are trying to export the product. So we have a different market like Myanmar, we have Thailand, we have Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, then we have Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, right? So overall, they have a different strategy and different information or data required. If you strategize the priority, say in terms of prioritizing the submission, then what you can do, wherever the countries, those who are offering the registration at the faster rate, early entry, that is like Thailand, Malaysia, you can target that market first, because though market size is medium, however the approval timeline is also very less. So almost 1.5 year is the approval timeline. Though they talk about the medium complexity, ease of doing of the business is high in Malaysia, right? So that is the reason we have, while submitting, we are prioritizing, like, okay, Malaysia you can do that, Thailand you can submit that. However, when you talk about the Indonesia or Singapore, where in Indonesia market size is high, however regulatory complexity is also high and ease of doing the business is low, we can target such countries at the level 3 like Singapore or Indonesia. However, again, Vietnam, regulatory complexity is too high. I'm sorry, extremely sorry. Where language barrier is again high, they're not able to understand. They are taking dot, hyphen, comma as a complex nature of the submission, because their language has very limitation. Their one word has 7 or 8 meaning based on your pronunciation. So as pronunciation changes, the meaning of same word changes. So such complicated country of Vietnam, regulatory complexity is very high. However, the intent of ease of doing business is medium and it has a high market. So that countries can be considered into wave 2. Okay. Likewise, we can strategize this submission. This is for Asian region. Participant, if you have any question, do put that question into the chat box, so that we have divided this entire session into 2 parts. One will be for the emerging market trend, and another part will be DMF, ASMF, and CEP. So 50 minutes we'll be conducting the session, and we will be keeping 10 minutes for question and answer, and then we will start with another session, and similarly 50 minutes will be there, and we will have the 10 minutes question answer. Now, when you talk about the ACTD versus ICSCTD, as I already explained to you, ACTD, where Module 2 and Module 3 combinedly form as Part 2. Module 1 is Part 1, where administrative information is there. Module 2, Module 3 is related to Part 2, Module 4, Part 3, and Module 5, Part 4. Okay. Now, when you talk about the filing strategy or roadmap, I talked about the plan, how to prioritize. Then we talk about the regulatory intelligence, where guidelines local requirement, stability, then bioequivalence, labeling requirement, all these intelligence parameter come into the picture. Then you have dossier preparation, then you have submission strategy, then you have review approval and life cycle management. When you talk about in similar manner that the roadmap, when we have a regulatory filing pathways like standard pathway, a bridge pathway, verification pathway, and based on the key references, how if the product is already approved in US, IMA, TGA, PMDA, Japan, or Health Canada, such as high stringent and high regulatory authority countries, then based on this, your timeline is significantly reduced up to 3 to 9 months, irrespective of other timeline like 12 months, 6 months to 36 months, that timeline significantly reduces to 3 to 9 months. So this could be another strategy. Now, what is the success factor when we talk about ASEAN region? We have to identify which is the reference market and reference market approval first. If the product is approved in Singapore, which is the reference market for ASEAN region, other countries will take less amount of the time. However, country-specific customization, looking at the country-specific requirement, doing the global clinical trial, then proper, reliable local partner who will avail all the services and communication with agency as early as possible in the faster rate. Then proper or early planning and intelligence and development that give you a strong platform to get your product registered. Then about your quality information study, CMC, and quality data. CMC is nothing but chemistry manufacturing control. That information builds up a specific success in ASEAN region. Now, when we talk about such doing in the core ASEAN region, we have to customize as country-specific requirement. We have to start with faster market like Malaysia, Thailand, or Singapore to generate the early revenue. We have to invest in stability studies as for Zone 4B, which we talk about 3075, right? Then labeling conditions should be studied country-specific. And we have to engage regulator as early as possible, such as pre-submission meetings. So, if we start hunting these regulatory agencies early, then there are high chances your product is getting registered. And also, most importantly, in significant factor nowadays is pharmacovigilance and post-approval changes. That is also playing a vital role. Now we are moving to the Africa. Say, for example, Africa, again, it is divided into South Africa, East African countries, or Central African countries, right? North African countries, which are French West Africa, these are handled differently. So it is also known as ECOWAS countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Senegal. Then you have North African like Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia. French speaking countries are there. Then you have EAC region where Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda are there. Central African like Cameroon, DR Congo, Gabon, Congo, etc. Then you have a specific South Africa and multi-country initiatives like ABRF or MRH. Now here you have to have a strategizing principle. Product which is registered in South Africa, one country is missing here. Apologize for that. It's Zimbabwe. That has a Zazibona route like Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, Namibia. I wish to mention that. Africa, if product is registered in South Africa, automatically it has high amount of the leverage in other African market, along with except French West Africa or West Africa and North Africa. If the product is registered in Zimbabwe, and automatically EAC and Zazibona region, the time is getting reduced when product is registered in Zimbabwe. Then you have strategically considering the Nigeria based on the ease of doing business and amount of the money which is available, you plan your submissions accordingly. Some of the countries consider Egypt as an African country or GCC part. Some of the people says into the GCC region. But again, probability of working into the African market is varying. So here what we have to do, we have to strategize like South Africa, Zimbabwe as initial. Once the product is approved in South Africa, Zimbabwe, automatically other countries start adapting it. Like SADC region where South Africa, Zambia and Zimbabwe are there. You can see into the South Africa region which is parked into the orange color. Okay. Then you talk about the North Africa region. The highest population is there with Algeria and Morocco. If the product is registered in Algeria and Morocco, automatically other country like Tunisia has they accept or they provide you the faster registration as compared to the normal time which is required when the product is not registered in Algeria. Now, how your regulatory pathway is getting varied in the Africa. Previously, why here I am quoting references from ACTD to CTD. Now you need to understand part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. Now from ACTD, we have to convert that into modules. Module 1, part 2 will be split into module 2 and module 3. Then you have module 4 and module 5. Here, Reliance pathway is applicable when the product is registered with WHO as well, WHO PQ. That is WHO pre-qualification, and the product is getting registered within 6 to 12 months if the product is having USFDA approval, EMA approval, and regional pathway. Say for example, if MCAZ and South Africa approval is there, then otherwise you have the national registration for all of the countries. So this is how you are planning. Strategy will be there. So ACTD needs to be flexible, and that has to adapt it version to the CTD. So thereby from part you have to change it to CTD format in the model in terms of model. Now, here again, market assessment prioritization, understanding the regulatory intelligence, dossier preparation, submission review, and life cycle management, as we have seen into the ASEAN region. What are the challenges related to pharmacology? Challenges remain same throughout any of the market, like diverse regulatory requirement, long approval timeline, then labeling and language variation, because French West Africa talking about French. Then African countries like South Africa, Zimbabwe talks about the English language requirement. Certain countries like Algeria, even they talk about the bilingual requirement, Arabic requirement are also there, and local QPPV system that are also required. That is qualified pharmacovigilance person for management of pharmacovigilance. So this is overall about the African strategy. Now we'll move towards the BRICS strategy. We talk about the BRICS strategy. So when we talk about the BRICS, the first and foremost country that comes into the picture is China, where regulatory authority SFDA now named as NMPA. NMPA. Then in India we have CSTO, then Brazil, we have Anvisa. Again, South Africa is coming into the picture, which is from the African continent and region. Now, potential and complexity with reference to chart where regulatory complexity high and market potential is high. Country is China, where high complexity there, high market potential is there. Brazil, high potential is there, high complexity is there. Russia, moderate potential but high complexity. Then India, it has high potential, moderate complexity, and in South Africa, moderate potential and low complexity. So we have to strategize submission considering this model where priority of submission is important. Right. Again, China, what they do generally, they accept all of request all of the information, but they don't grant the product registration as early as possible. Hence, the maximum timeline is there with China. Russia asks local clinical trial. So again, additional 6 month to 8 month timeline is involved into the Russia. So accordingly, we have to plan our submissions. Then the map which we are talking about previously. Similarly, market prioritization, regulatory intelligence, dossier preparation, submission reviews, approval of registration, post-approval commitment, and life cycle management. Similar CTD-based submission about model 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and local adaptation, because they are asking about the core CTD, local requirement, all the things in place, and thereby your product can be registered in the BRICS market as early as possible. Now, what are the success factors here? Strong local partner is important in India, in China, in Russia, in South Africa, because every country, they are asking about their own requirement, their own language, their translation. So if you have a strong local partner who can convey the message properly to the agency, that will gives you easy access to the market and success. So when you talk about the success factor, first country, that is automatically India, then South Africa, Brazil, Russia, and China is last prioritizing country when you talk about the sequence of getting approval of or getting product registration. So I understand we are on time. I've completed this first part of the submission, and session is open for question answer. I'm just closing the presentation. Session is open for question answer.
Uh, We can take the question answer at the last itself.
Oh, as you feel appropriate, ma'am, because what I've thought, 50 minutes for first session, 50 minutes for second session, and 10-minute question answer, because these are different aspect. We will be moving towards the DMF CEP requirement or ASMF requirement, so there should not be confusion. So I requested, like, once this session is over, we'll have a 10 minutes question answer, and then we'll move to the second session.
Okay. Any of the participants, if you have any doubt, please ask, or you can write down in the message comment.
Yeah, chart is also okay. And don't feel shy, none of the question, and don't feel that should I ask the question or it is the will it be the foolish question. Don't feel in that sense. Okay, Ms. Pradnya, we have thanks that you have talked about first question. What are the biggest regulatory challenges faced during product registration in emerging market? The biggest regulatory challenge that is faced in this clinical trial data, and second biggest challenge is with reference to product development, sourcing of ICH, R&D. That are the biggest challenge that we are facing when product registration into the emerging market. Because every country has a different clinical requirement. So, to understand all these things, there are hell number of the time that is involved. Thank you, Shubham. We have another question that with the herbal market growing so rapidly nowadays, how can we as MPharm students specializing in phytopharmacy, phytomedicines successfully enter the regulatory affairs sector? Okay, nice question. With reference to your product development of phytopharmaceutical, when you talk about the phytopharmaceutical requirements are quite different. Certain countries, they are considering phytopharmaceutical or herbal product under the case of nutraceutical, so your requirement are significantly getting down. However, certain countries, they treat in the similar manner. Even additionally, when you are doing the plant extract or directly from the plant, or plant origin or material from the plant, then heavy metal and other testing that comes into the picture. We have Ministry of Ayush for it, where the specific requirement are been defined in terms of pharmaceutical development for phytopharmaceutical product. And when you wish to enter similar stage into the RA industry, you're talking about the entry of your post doing the graduation or post graduation in phytopharmaceutical into the regulatory affair. You need to understand ICH, you need to understand the CTD requirement, and best and foremost is product developmental strategy, because development, when you're talking about it, is always gives you the upper hand as understanding of the product design space, then product development strategy, product development plan. These things come to the picture when you're filing the regulatory dossier, and that plays a vital role during the submission. Irrespective of the domain, we hire people from pharmacochemistry, phytochemistry. There is no such restriction that only Sutix or QA people can join or pharmacology people can join. Anyone who has done this specialization is welcome into the RA. Now we have another question from Mane. What are the requirement of emerging market for control of nitrosamine in drug product? Nice question. There are certain set of nitrosamine impurity guideline and risk assessment which is required, where nitrosetting agents are there. Now nitrosamine generation, how does the nitrosamine are generated? Basically, when there is a nitrosetting agent which is available into the product, and when there is a environment which is favorable to generation of nitrosamine, say for example low pH, or nitrosetting availability of the nitrosetting or nitrous ion or nitrogen ion, amines. So that are emerging or factored starting points of the nitrosamine impurity, right? If your product is having pH which is greater than 7, or your product is using alkaline level, then the generation of nitrosamine is very low. So you have to provide, you have to generate a risk assessment where you have to give the RPN, which is risk probability numbers, and based on the risk probability number and risk assessment, nitrosamine impurity risk assessment has to be developed, and that is required to be submitted as a part of dossier in every emerging market. Then we have another question from Naneshwar Mari. What strategy we should apply for implementation of change when we submit variation to MOH and not received approval for more than 2 years? Nice question, Naneshwar. Usually, what happen, various countries they have defined the timeline of approval. If timeline of approval is not given, unless and until you receive the approval, you cannot move ahead. Say, for example, Vietnam is one of the country where we have also filed the variation almost 5 years back, and that variation got approved now in 2026. And now the situation is that with development of pharmacopoeia, the product is moved to the next stage of higher stringency. And again, we have to file the variation, and we are not sure when the product will get registered. So at that moment of time, country-specific specification is answer to your question, that you keep your specification same for particular that MOH, for particular that market, and other market wherever you are getting the product approved, change that specification to the country-specific specification, and you can move on. Then we have next question, that what with the fast changing rules in emerging market, do you think artificial intelligence can help in regulatory affairs teams to track these guidelines more easily? Anushka, you are talking about the artificial intelligence now. However, pharmaceutical industry has adapted artificial intelligence quite years ago, like 5 years or 10 years ago only. However, it was not into the so big picture that is currently portrayed. We were tracking our manufacturing process, what will be the team, what will be the outcome, what is the favorable environment that is required when we are talking about the for product development, synthesis, or fermentation technologies. What are the favorable environment that is required when your product distribution or maximum cells will be available, and how that will that will be what you can say, produce the maximum of the protein. So that AI is already playing a vital role. Then we have various software like Clarivate analysis. We have, they are charging 1 crore rupees subscription per year for single login, where they are giving us output what are the various requirement of the agencies, and accordingly one report they are generating, that how to move on to the market registration. Okay, so yes, artificial intelligence is going to help, and they are going to keep the changes of tracking ever changing regulations and guidelines, and it is a vital role. Then another question from Ms. Mai is that what are the major compliances risks when dealing with multiple emerging market regulations? Compliance itself is a chapter, Ms. Mai. We have various requirement of multimedia dissolution. Say, for example, for comparative dissolution pattern, which is required for one of the country. At the same time, if when we are talking about the complex generics, where your batch size plays vital role. Say, for example, one of the molecule which is liposomal molecule, then your batch size clinical study which is developed for that batch size is only applicable when you change the market. Again, you have to do the country's batch size specific developmental requirement that needs to be submitted to the agency. Such type of compliance issues are coming into the picture. Second is about the pharmacovigilance. Again, country vigilance, that plays a vital role, and that is giving the compliance issues and hurdle for the next stage of the life cycle management. Then we have another question from Ms. Nirali Shruti, that how can regulatory framework support the integration of traditional herbal medicine with evidence-based modern healthcare system? Absolutely, Shruti. When we are talking about the traditional herbal medicine with evidence-based modern healthcare system, say for example, HPTLC analysis are there. Now you have to integrate such analytical technologies with modern analytical tools, and such approach should be there while developing the product. You have to what you can say, apply the rules and regulations, all the rules and regulations of pharmaceutical product when you are developing a herbal medicine. Traditional knowledge, only traditional knowledge will not serve any purpose. Evidence-based modern healthcare system. Say, for example, I would like to quote one example of a company which is situated here in India, here in Pune, here in Wakad, which is Emprex. They are working in nutraceutical clinical trial. Even their one of the product was there. I don't remember the name of the product, but they have patented the herbal medicine by B12 Medifort. I think Medifort tablet is the name of the product, where herbal formulation along with B12 they got the patent, and such product can be go into the market, where they have used the traditional herbal knowledge and they have done the clinical studies, and they have generated the evidence based on the modern healthcare system, by doing the preclinical, by doing the clinical studies, publishing the papers, publishing into the various journals which are having impact factor of more than 20, 25. So, for example, publishing you are into the Nature Herbal, Nature Medicine, where impact factor is close to 95, 105, or 115. Putting up your developmental aspects with modern analytical technique, analyzing in terms of ash value, in terms of heavy metal content, and all of the information, prioritizing the production, environmental conditions for that product, assessment, collection, everything that comes into the picture. So thereby, this is how you have to fit into the regulatory framework. You have to understand the requirement of FSSAI in India. You have to understand the requirement of nutraceutical. You have to understand the requirement of food ingredient, and you have to understand the requirement of medicine as well when you are talking about the traditional herbal medicine with modern healthcare system. As a RA student from Neha Patamwar, how can I learn this application process at ground level? Neha, when you are a RA student, learning this at ground level is only by understanding the CTD requirement, because for other countries you have to have a login based analysis. You have to submit the company registration certificate, and then only you'll be able to access the portal and other requirement. So you can reach to the regulatory person into the industry, and thereby you can understand. Or otherwise, all of the countries, they have published their guideline at free of cost. You need to go through that guidelines and understand what are the requirement, so that you can level all these application processes at ground level. Now we have another question from Divya Patil. What are the opportunities for pharma companies in emerging market like India, Brazil, China? Market is open if you are ready to work as a product developer. You start up as a product research based molecule. You have a great opportunity in India, Brazil, as well as China. China is quite difficult because all the intellectual information they are asking to store on their own database, on their own server. However, I can definitely vouch for Brazil and India. Okay, so it's now 11 o'clock, so we'll switch to another session. I hope I have answered all of your queries. You can confirm whether my answers are acceptable or not onto the chat box. If at all still you feel that is not answered, you reach me directly. I will be more than happy to answer you. I got one last query. This will be the last query that we are going to take care. Rohini Hivarkar, in our regulatory affairs studies, we focus heavily on current guidelines. However, with the industry moving so fast, how do you personally stay updated on this global shift, and what resources would you recommend for us to student to keep our regulatory intelligence sharp? You have to follow the ICH region and their CHMPs, because whatever the guidelines or whatever the changes are there, they are continuously publishing their changes and they're continuously putting up their guidelines. Yes, we totally understand your reliance is currently on the current guideline. However, the current guideline which are there in your book and your syllabus could be outdated, because every new year, every new month, putting up certain requirement as an additional requirement. So it is there is no other choice. You have to visit to these regulatory websites, regulatory authorities website every now and then to stay updated. Okay, so we'll be moving to the, I'll be sharing my screen. Just give me confirmation whether it is visible or not. We'll be moving to the next part as DMF, ASMF, and CEP. Okay. Please give me confirmation whether my screen is visible or not. Someone please unmute yourself and tell me whether screen is visible or not.
Yes, it is visible. It is visible, sir.
Thank you. Session has to be interactive. It should not be monotonous. So please stay attentive. If anything is required, do let me know. Now, what do you mean by DMF? Anyone because people those who are working in industry are there, people those who are like MPharm students are there. So can anyone define what is DMF? Yes, please unmute yourself and anyone can answer this question. Do you anyone aware about full form of DMF?
It is drug master file, sir.
Right, absolutely right. ASMF? Yes, please. ASMF? Active Substance Master File? CEP? CEP? Okay, we'll come, learn to the upcoming slides. Now DMF, it is absolutely drug master file. In US, there are 5 types of DMF: type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, and type 5. Type 1 and type 5 no more used. Type 2 DMF consists of drug substance, the dossier for drug substance, drug product, packaging material. We have another type for packaging material, right? Now, how do we take this up when we are doing the submissions? So, a drug master file is a submission to USTA that contains a confidential and detailed information about facility, processes, or article used in manufacturing, processing, packaging, and storing of human drug. While not required by law or regulation, DMF are commonly used to protect the proprietary information and support the various drug application. How? Because if your DMF is filed to US, then only DMF access letter, an open part of the DMF that needs to be shared with the person, those who are procuring API, and thereby you have there is no requirement of submission of detailed information and confidential information to the other party, client, or other regulatory agencies. This gives you upper hand in terms of sharing a minimal information with other parties or other distributor, and having a high assurance that data leakage will not be there. Now, what are the 5 different type of DMF we talk about? Type 1, which is for related to manufacturing site, facility, operating procedure, and personnel. Now, no longer it has been accepted by US FDA. Type 2, we have for drug substance, intermediate, and drug product. Type 3 is for packaging material, we just learn about that. Type 4 is for excipient, colorant, flavor, or essence. And type 5 is FDA related references or accepted reference information. It is discouraged by US FDA. However, sometime if there is no other alternative or authority is there, and based on the risk versus benefit analysis, they might accept information which is submitted as a type 5. Now, what are the critical functions of DMF? DMF, the most important and critical function is to protect confidential information. Then, to support multiple regulatory application and to ensure product quality and consistency. Now, what are close part of the DMF and what is the open part of the DMF? So anything which is important or where the upper hand to the accessible person is there, where he can duplicate the manufacturing process and start its own manufacturing, that is considered as a confidential part. Okay. Now, what that includes? That includes your product development report, that includes your route of synthesis, that includes your impurity analysis, that includes your elemental analysis, that includes your process validation activities, that included your analytical method validation, raw material used in synthesis of that product. So this information is considered as confidential information. And if this information is available to the accessor or person where we are submitting our DMF, then he can easily duplicate the process and manufacture the product. As generic is quite easy to work it out, and that is the reason where we have to protect the confidential information. So usually DMF is filed to US FDA, ASMF is filed to EMA, CEP is Certificate of European Pharmacopoeia, product Certificate of Suitability, where if the product is official in respective PHUR, accordingly that product information complete information is need to be filed to the Europe, and thereby you can receive the CEP certificate. And wherever you are submitting the dossier, at that moment of the submission, you can submit, instead of dossier, you can submit the CEP or give the CEP number. Okay. Now we are talking about the protection of confidential information. I told you about the raw material manufacturing process, analytical method, process validation, product development report. So that will ease out third party to understand the intellectual property. So to prevent that understanding and prevent your own intellectual information in submission of NDA and ANDA, DMF submission is very much important and mandatory. Okay. Now, again, you are manufacturer of API and you are selling your API to 50 vendors. Giving dossier and updates to 50 people is quite critical task. Rather giving up all this thing, if you're filing that DMF and DMF to US FDA or to IMA or to PHUR, one of the changes, you need to only send an email to RT that these are the changes, and we have filed all these post-approval changes to the agency like USFDA and other thing. You are maintaining that information with them, and that will lead to less amount of the involvement of your technical person in filing of the variation. So it simplifies the submission process and it reduces the redundancy in the documentation or duplication of the documentation. Okay. Then it ensures the product quality and consistency, because DMF consists of critical information on raw material, its intermediate, manufacturing process and process control, analytical method, specification, process validation or method validations, stability data, and it has to meet all of the GMP standards which are mentioned in the product registration requirement. So considering all these characteristics, we have to ensure that product quality and consistency that remains valid throughout the life cycle management, throughout the product approval stages, throughout the product market circulation stages. Okay, clear all of you? Okay. Now what are additional critical functions of DMF? It facilitates the faster regulatory review. It is not dependent but independently approved, but still considered as a critical and global regulatory importance. Considering this another pillar, how it is. Like it streamlines the review process by providing the pre-submitted and well-organized technical data in terms of Module 3 to S. Okay. It reduces back and forth queries because DMF is neither approved nor rejected. What they do when you submit the DMF to the agency, they will keep with them whenever any finished product manufacturer uses that DMF, then the review procedure start and the queries will be sent to manufacturer, and same set of information will be given to the finished product manufacturer stating that these are the queries which are already been sent from FDA side to API manufacturer, for which there are indents of the document. Okay, so it reduces back and forth queries and it gives the faster decision because everything is there in the database XML backbone of USFDA in terms of ECTD DMF submission. So this facilitates the easy access and easy review. Then it is not independently approved but still critical. As I mentioned, DMF is neither approved nor rejected as its own. However, the content of DMF are evaluated only in terms of submission of ANDA or NDA. And if the information in DMF is inadequate, it will delay or impact the approval of referencing application. Getting my point? Clear? Now, although the concept originated with US FDA, similar systems are used by other regulators. So in EU, same, it is called as ASMF, Active Substance Master File. In Canada, again, it is called as Drug Submission Application Master File. So there is, usually speaking, there is no difference between DMF and ASMF except for the titlement and little bit requirement about the country specific requirements. Say for example, when you are talking about US and when you are talking about the EU, whenever you are filing any product to US and if the product is pharmacopoeial or excipients or raw material are pharmacopoeial in USP, United States Pharmacopoeia or National Formulary of US pharmacopoeia. In that sense, you have to abide, you have to follow the law of land, and all of your excipient packaging material in terms of glass, say for example, or plastic, they should comply to the USP standards which are mentioned, right? All of the raw material excipient, if they are primarily official in USP, then by law of land, it has to comply the USP standard. Then only product is registered in US. While in EMA and Europe, the API excipient raw material, if it is registered in, if you have the excipient or other things which are registered in EMA as PHUR compliance, you have to follow PHUR compliance or BP compliance when you're talking about the UK, and thereby your submission has to be planned in that sense. I hope I'm clear till this point. Dear friends, please give me confirmation, because we have very limited slides information over here. Almost 18 slides are there. So this has to understand in quite deeper extent, because most of the regulatory aspects are common for DS, and same information is used when drug product is registered with module 3.2s. Now, when you're talking about the DMF USA and API MF and European region or EMA, what are the key documents required? DMF in CTD format for module 2, sorry, DMF in CTD format, then module 3 including but not limited to the manufacturing process stability data, GMP compliance, and letter of authorization to reference the drug for finished product manufacturer. When you're talking about ASMF, then applicant has to submit the part, however restricted part is confidential, that can be supplemented by API manufacturer. It is not required, it is not available with finished product manufacturer, hence they cannot supplement it clearly. Okay. Module 3 again, including but not limited to the quality and analytical validation, other all of the information has to be submitted to the agency by API manufacturer. And thereby, if the product is that we have complained said just now, certificate of suitability, if it is available, then that is called as CEP, certificate of suitability for European pharmacopoeia. It is also called as certificate COS, certificate of suitability, when you are filing, getting the product approved, like in terms of your excipients. Getting my point? If it is official in EP or PHO. When you're talking about the Canada, Japan, China, at that moment of time, Canada again has similar set of type 1, type 2, type 3, and type 4 DMF. Japanese, you mention it as JDMF. It is similar to the DMF, only annexes of J is there, and it is into Japanese language format, and it is mandatory to perform the translation in local language. And again, residual solvent and impurities are again additional information which is required for Japan. Now, say for example, Japanese manufacturer, if they register the product, Japan has to, or Japanese manufacturer has to submit additional certificate that it is free from radiation. Yes, even though Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing had happened almost 50-70 years back, still the manufacturer of Japan has to submit radiation free certificate of product which is manufactured in Japan throughout the world. Clear? That is an exclusive requirement for manufacturers in Japan. Other countries like US, they ask for it, EMA, they ask for it. Getting my point? Then National Medicinal Product Administration, NMPA, China, they call it as API registration platform, where full CTD data set is required. Again, here, everywhere they can come for inspection with announced way or in announced way, non-announced, unannounced. Sorry. So it could be either announced inspection or unannounced inspection in any of the case. Now, when you talk about the TGA, Australia Therapeutic Good Administration, again, DMF and CEP both are accepted over here, API submission format. When we talk about the Brazil, it is CADIFA or DIFA. Sorry, for Mexico it is CADIFA. For coffee press. For Brazil it is DIFA, DIFA, which is drug information file for API dossier. It is into the 32S format. However, translation of that CTT format is in Portuguese language. So Portuguese language is used as a translation format, and visa certification has to be there, and local testing is mandatory. Along with that, one of the requirements, strange requirement, is that you have to give instrumentation, drawing, everything of the drug substance where you are doing the synthesis and purification and other information. When you're talking about the Australia, again it is regional CTD requirement 32S. CEP is also accepted. USGMF is also accepted. DMF authorization letter is required, and letter of authorization to the applicant is also required when you're talking about the Australia. Now GCC region including Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. So Saudi Arabia, SFDA is maturity level 4 country, which is stringent regulatory, as like a stringent regulatory authority in USFDA. It has a similar requirement of SFDA. Their primary focus and acceptance is product which are registered in US. Same product can be registered in Saudi Arabia. For other products, they need to demonstrate the equivalence of the product with USFDA registered product by using the Saudi innovator, Saudi product, and exclusive development required to be as per the Saudi requirement. Again, a strange requirement of Saudi is there. You can see a strange requirement. Why I'm saying? Because they are asking a stability data of 30 degrees Celsius plus 70% RH or sometimes 75% RH. 70% RH and 75% RH, yes, relative humidity. So that is a specific requirement when you are talking about Saudi FDA or SFDA and UAE. Again, the format is same. It is CTD format. Then you have to submit the site master file. Certificate of pharmaceutical product or GMP certificate is mandatory. In module 3, all of the information except for close part that needs to be supplemented, and close part has to be supplemented by manufacturer directly to the agencies. And stability, as I mentioned, 3075 is required for zone 4B. Then additionally, Arabic translations are required. Halal certification is also required. Porcine free origin certificate is also required. Melamine certificate is also required in certain set of information. And nitrosamine impurities, additional nitrosamine impurity declaration, that is also required when we are talking about the global requirement in terms of GCC region. Now, we have talked about DMF. Now we are jumping to active substance master file, ASMF, which is previously known as EDMF or European Drug Master File, which is primarily used in EU, UK, and other prominent region nearby to EU, just like Ukraine or Slovakia or Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, in that region. Now you need to also understand that UK previously was part of EMA. Once the Brexit had happened, then it has moved out of the EMA region and established their own requirement. However, if the product is having a EMA approval and drug substance is already been filed, and RFD status of the drug product is already been granted, such technical information is accepted by UK even though the Brexit had happened. Okay, but vice versa is not applicable. Whatever is approved in UK is not blindly accepted in European region because of the European Union requirement and their currency requirement or their technical requirement that has been collaboratively confirmed with member state countries of 28 member state countries. Now, they allows API manufacturer to submit the detailed information which include confidential part, open part and restricted part directly to the regulatory authority, while only providing non-confidential information to MH, marketing authorization holder or finished product manufacturer who is going to manufacture their own finished product by using information of your substance. Is that clear? Yes, my dear friends, please be interactive. It should not be the monotonous session. If at all it is not clear, you ask me now, or we can take your questions at the later stage, but just ensure it is. Okay. ASMF are often used for API and not covered by PHR monograph or when additional proprietary information needs the protection. Okay. Again, those API which are covered under PHR, they may seek approval of CEP. And other than the CEP, you can file the ASMF. Even the technical information, know-how, and you have high reliance on high confidential information, then that needs to be filed separately as an AMF to the agency so that there won't be a repetitive information that is given. Is that clear? Okay, we'll be moving to the next slide. What are the part of ASMF? Applicant part and restricted part. What is applicant part or open part, and what will be the contents of restricted part? Now, applicant part contains non-confidential information related to quality, which is disclosed to marketing authorization holder or finished product manufacturer, so as to allow them to take responsibility of their own drug product, which include drug substance specification, method of analysis, COA, stability. Okay, then restricted part. It contains information which is related to the manufacturing, purification, validation, and submitted directly to the authorities. Is that clear? Then what are the key advantage of ASMF? There is protection of intellectual property as ASMF is split into the applicant part and RP restricted part, and the restricted part is directly submitted to the authorities. So there is clear cut protection of data from MH, and intellectual property remains intact. Then you have a regulatory flexibility and operational efficiency as single ASMF can be referred in multiple application by different MAH holder. As similar way we have learned into US FDA DMF filing. So same regulatory flexibility is and operational efficiency is allocated or given by the agencies. Now, work sharing procedure. They have a common work sharing procedure in EU, ASMF work sharing procedure. It reduces the workload both for industry as well as the regulator, because once it is reviewed, then again for all of the application, similar set of information is not required to be reviewed across different European Union countries, because European Union countries has two set of filing, that is centralized filing as well as decentralized filing. Centralized filing is mandatory for biosimilar. However, for pharmaceutical products, centralized filing is not mandatory. You can have the DCP filing, decentralized filing. However, if you choose to file the centralized filing to IMA, then that gives you additional privilege, additional assurance that already information has been circulated to the 28 member state countries. Your product is passing through whatever the requirements are there. Then it is facilitating the complex procedure, unlike CEP, which are generally only for pharmacopoeial substance. ASMF is for new chemical entity, new pharmacopoeial material, and complex API as well as biological APIs as well. Clear, my dear friends? Okay, we'll move to the next point. CEP, what is the suitability of European pharmacopoeia and how it has been issued from EDQM, which is Quality of Medicine and Healthcare, European Directorate for Quality of Medicine and Healthcare. Now, CEP, mark my word, it is applicable only to the product APIs, excipient which are official in European pharmacopoeia. Clear? It certifies that API complies with European pharmacopoeia monograph requirement. It simplifies the approval process in Europe by directly referencing the CEP certificate in MA. So there is no other need, there is no need of submitting information, anything. If you have CEP certificate, that is good enough when you are doing the submission to the EMA through MA applicant. Now, it focuses on quality and manufacturing. It includes the impurity and TSC BSC risk analysis. Now, what do you mean by TSC BSC? Transmissible spongiform encephalopathy and bovine spongiform encephalopathy risk. Now, if at all any substance is animal origin and it is from bovine sources, then product has to be free from BSC, which is bovine spongiform encephalopathy. Porcine, if it is It should be free from transmissible spongiform encephalopathy because prions and other diseases or mad cow syndrome that can be caused because of the contamination from prions or viruses which are from animal, and if that subsequently transferred into the next stage of the life of the product, then that may lead to the disaster in the world. That is the reason TSC BSc certificate is mandatory requirement. It also has a requirement of declaration of nitrosamine free risk assessment. Then what is the out of scope of CP procedure? Substances which are not covered in PHR, substances which do not comply with the definition section of the monograph, biologicals and product extracted from animal tissue. These are out of the scope of CEP. These are under the coverance of ASMF, but not under the coverance of CEP. Human tissue derivatives, blood derivative, and vaccine are out of the CAP, and finished product formulation are also out of the CAP. Okay. Now, what are the types of CAP? We have chemical CP, we have herbal CP. Those my participants, my friend, fellow colleagues, those who have asked about the herbal product and herbal API, please refer to this. The product like CP is divided into chemical CP, herbal CP. It guarantees the compliance with general monograph requirement with product with TSC BSc certificate free. Please note that CEP does not replace the certificate of analysis. Certificate of analysis has to be there. CEP does not replace the qualified person declaration, that is QP approval or QP declaration. CEP is not a GMP certificate. CEP is only compliance requirement that API or material excipient which is manufactured is as per the requirement of European Pharmacopoeia. Clear? You got the basic difference between DMF, ASMF, and CAP. So, when to each CEP, when the API complies with PHR monograph and target market is Europe, we can use CEP. ASMF, when the submitting to Europe as well as UK, and no CEP is available or applicable at that moment of time, you can use ASMF. And when you are submitting the product to US FDA, non-EU market, then you can use DMF. Okay, clear differentiation is marked. Now, comparative table between CEP versus ASMF versus DMF. CEP exclusively required for Europe and for pharmacopoeia compliance only. ASMF for Europe as well as UK, DMF, US, Canada, Japan, and other countries. Okay. Now, confidential information, no closed part, full assessment by EDQM. ASMF consists of closed plus open part. DMF consists of confidential as well as non-confidential part. Public availability, usage in filing, public information is limited. CP, public information is not available. Is ASMF, it is not public. DMF, it is not public. Okay. Thank you very much. We have covered up this session in 30 minutes now. Session is again open for question and answer.
Yes, anyone who has any questions, please.
Post your question in the chat box.
Don't feel shy. If madam, if they are allowed to unmute themselves and ask the question, that is also okay. This is the platform where they can express their feeling, their question, and no one should feel how should I ask the question. Please be open enough. How can we incorporate stronger regulatory affair perspective into our thesis writing or during our project? Shubham, very good question. When you wish to incorporate stronger regulatory affair perspective into our thesis writing, there are two things that we need to define. One, primarily the requirement of university, or primarily the requirement of thesis chapters that are defined as per the requirement of PCI. However, secondary, when you wish to represent yourself to the regulatory agency for interview or to the regulator to the interview, your project, you can draft that project in terms of dossier. You can draft that information as 32S, 32P, that part. Try to represent information in their requirement format. That gives you the strong emphasis, and that can be after your thesis requirement. You can compile up the thesis as per university requirement, institutional requirement, and then you can add one of the information which is incorporated as per the regulatory requirement, so that that will gives you quite confidence, and even reviewer quite confidence that okay, he has done his work as per the meticulous requirement of PCI or university, and then additionally, as regulatory perspective is or regulatory understanding is good, he has also managed to submit into the dossier. Because whatever you are doing into the your pharmacy, say for example, you are synthesizing your product, so you have to have information about 32S, drug substance, DMF information, what are the raw material that you are using, information about the raw material. Then you have product development strategy, synthesis, then certification. You have MSDS along with MSDS with you. You have certificate of analysis. Then what are the reference certificate which are available in terms of USP? Their reference UI from EDK. Then you can reference that information and storage of that API in your bags and stability of that information. Then you can formulate your next chapter of drug product. And similarly, in the next chapter of drug product, you can write about the 32P part, about the pharmaceutical development, how you have developed the product. In 32P part, then you have its innovator product is there, how you have provided, you develop your product, and comparative analysis of your developed product. That type of assessment of your thesis, that gives an emphasis and understanding, as well as quite good nature of work that can be presented in that format. I hope I've answered your question. Now, Raju, yes, you said that can we file sterile and non-sterile API from single DMF if sterilization is only additional processing during the manufacturing? Dear Raju, the question remains valid. You can file sterile and non-sterile API from single DMF, no issue. But why you want to claim the product API as a sterile? If most of the time API, if you are going to manufacture a sterile, then aseptic processing involve hell amount of the high amount of the cost, hell amount of the cost is required. So strategy of filing of sterile API and non-sterile API from single DMF, what are the sterilization steps that you are incorporating? Either they are in terms of what you can say gamma radiation or autoclaving or thermolabile sterilization, that needs to be assessed. But as an only additional process during manufacturing is definitely not required, not recommended, because API will be then used for finished product manufacturer. If your API is ready to use, so dispensing again, that is ready to use powder for injection, then there is no differences in API and finished product. You only need to dispense in finished product vial, and that becomes your finished product. So strategy is different in terms of API when you're talking about the sterile or non-sterile. And if you're talking about claiming it sterile, then aseptic processing, media field simulation, that comes into the picture even for the API, and cost of the claiming sterility becomes high, and vulnerability that or high chances that product will not be claimed, will not be accepted in the market. Why? Because when you're doing the formulation, again you have to do the sterilization for injectable. Or for the tablet capsules, even that is not required for tablet capsule, only microbiological limit test is required. But for injectable nanofiltration or virus, to remove the virus and contamination, other sterile filtrations is the step which is there in the injection. So basically, such requirement, I don't think so that is required to be worked out. Yes, any other question? Most welcome, Mr. Raju. From career's perspective, how important is expertise in DMF and ASMF for someone entering regulatory affair, and what specific technical and documentation skills should a student develop to build a strong profile in this domain? Now, if you wish to build a strong profile in this domain, you need to understand in minute what are the requirement of 3 to S. Say for example, US FDA, then along with that site master file related requirement and model 2 related requirement. If at all toxicity study and other things has been already been there with drug substance. Okay. Then you need for ASMF you need to have basic understanding of the synthesis procedure and structure of the DMF. Again, here you need to understand the elemental impurity, elemental assessment, nitrosamine impurity perspective, compilation of the dossier perspective. So documentation is very much important in industry. Whatever is documented is exist. Whatever is not documented, that doesn't exist in the industry. So when we are talking about career perspective, not only ICHM guideline, but ICHQ guideline that needs to be referred, product development needs to be referred, then your volatile impurity section needs to be referred. Then you need to understand which type of solvent, like solvent class 1, class 2, class 3, which solvent are authorized to be used, which solvent are not authorized to be used. Then residual amount of the volatile impurities that needs to be assessed. So such type of important aspects that we need to assess when you go into the deeper and deeper of DMF filing. Yes, Vaishnavi, I hope it is clear. Hello, sir. If USFD inspector finds a major issue in our DMF, does it automatically causes problem for our ASMF in Europe, or do both authority treat it separately? They have mutual recognition. If US DMF has find the major issues in the DMF, though they do have mutual recognition, but Form 483, unless and until you get the warning letter, that is not going to affect into the ASMF in Europe. Okay, but however, retrospectively, you can develop or have a corrective response even in the Europe. So it will boost your strategy while applying the same DMF or applying the information of API in Europe as well as US FDA. Okay, Ms. Anushka, anything additional if you need to let me know.
Thank you so much, sir, for insightful and engaging session. We truly appreciate the time and knowledge you shared with us today. I thank you everyone for the question and active participation. I request all the participants to kindly turn on your web camera for the moment so that we can capture the attendance.
Good morning, ma'am. Shilpa ma'am is also there, ma'am. I am very much fortunate enough today because Professor, those who have taught me, Shilpa ma'am has taught me when I was there in second year. The physical pharmacy also taught to us by Shilpa ma'am. So I'm really fortunate enough to deliver the session in front of teachers, those who have enabled me delivering this session. So I'm very grateful. With sincere gratitude, I would like to thanks Shilpa ma'am as well to present this session, and it is really my privilege to deliver session in front of you, ma'am. Ma'am, you are on mute, ma'am. Shilpa ma'am, you are on mute. We cannot hear you.
Sorry. Actually, we are proud of you as a student. Seeing you at a peak, seriously, it's a pride feeling.
Thank you, ma'am.
Further, I would like to thank our speaker, Mr. Sachin Gundecha, sir, for being a speaker for this webinar series. Now, I would like to request our organization team to kindly share e-certificate on this virtual platform.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now moving towards the conclusion, I would like to present the vote of thanks. On the behalf of entire team, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our speaker for delivering such a valuable session. I would also like to thank all the participants for the joining and making this session interactive and successful. Lastly, I request all the participants to kindly fill out the feedback form and attempt the quiz. The link will be shared with you on the WhatsApp group and in the YouTube chat box. I request everyone to kindly start their web cameras for the group photo. Thank you all.
Will the certificate will be mailed to me, ma'am, or it will be like here I need to capture the photo only? On the lighter side, please.
No, no,
No,
sir.
no, it will
Our
be
team
mailed.
will share
On
you.
the lighter side, ma'am, I'm just kidding. Nothing to take it seriously.
Thank you all. Have a great day ahead. Now I can conclude this session.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Sachin.
Thank you, Revan. How are you, man?
Yes.
Sorry, Revan sir, how are you? After a
I'm
long
fine.
time, right?
Yes, after a long time. I just remember your gathering days and other things. I remember I can very well active personality like you. Yes.
Whatever the platform that was given to us, like, during our day, Chaudhary sir has built up
Yes, yes.
us a lot. So that is the
Yes.
reason. It is really nice to see that my friends, my
Yes,
classmates
same.
are also there.
Yes, yes.
Even my senior Gundecha sir is there.
Thank you, Sachin sir. Hi.
Hi, Bhageshri ma'am. How are you? Another senior of ours?
Yes.
No, we cannot hear you, ma'am. Still you are
Hi,
not.
hi. Yes. Well, I'm fine. Very, very nice session which you have conducted today.
Thank you.
Very nice session which you conducted today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Should I leave the
Hello.
session? Yeah.
Yes, have a great day, Sachin ahead. Yes.
Same here. Same here.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Good day.